Oh my gosh, we've got a Necromancer in Flesh and Blood. I don't know about you, but I've waited years for this. I'm really excited. We're about to dive straight in and see exactly what the Necromancer does and what their play patterns are going to look like. Before we even look at the hero, though, the first question I always have is how much does the hero ability actually dictate the build of the hero? So I think the answer is that it depends on the hero. But regardless of who it is, the hero ability is always a really good starting point and will give you an idea of how to start the deck as you're putting it together, as you're starting to see the play lines, and then you'll see sometimes other play lines will overpower the innate ability of the hero, and other times the hero ability itself will be really good. We don't know, obviously, we've only seen a few cards for the Necromancer, so without anything else, let's just dive straight in. So we're looking at Gravy Bones, the Shipwreck Looter. His hero ability says instant, a symbol that we don't know, destroy a gold you control, then draw a card and discard a card. I assume this is going to be like a tap symbol or something. It could be like a sacrificing a minion. We truly do not know what this symbol is. It's pure speculation, and I just want to get here with the cold hard facts of what we have seen released. So there is some sort of ability with instant. It may or may not be a once per turn if it's a tap, or a soft once per turn if it's like a tap untap ability. But there's an instant ability with the cost of destroying a gold you control to draw and discard. Then he has a second text that says if a blue card has been put into your graveyard this turn, you may play cards with Watery Grave from your graveyard. Now, we haven't seen any Watery Grave cards yet, but we assume that there will be a nice card pool that we can play from the graveyard, and this is already giving us a lot of insight here to the hero. So what does this mean? What does a Necromancer deck look like just based off of this information alone? Well, for one, we need to create gold. We're going to need gold for the hero ability. We also like to draw faster through our deck and then fill our graveyard. So the hero ability is draw a card, then discard a card. We love to both cycle through our deck faster, so we'll see our cards faster than our opponent, but then we're also going to discard and fill the graveyard with cards that we can then play from the graveyard. Then moving on, we want a lot of blues in theory. Obviously the cost curve is pretty mysterious from right now, but I think that we want enough blues to both discard for the hero ability, the second text here, and then also to pay for things in graveyard. One key thing here that you'll notice is it says you may play cards from your graveyard. It does not say the extra text that new has. It says they're free. We still have to pay their full resource costs. So I assume that he'll be very blue heavy, both to like play out a blue with Go Again or something like that, and then also have more blues to pitch for resources. Lastly, we're of course going to want a critical mass of these Watery Grave cards that we can fill our graveyard with, that we can play multiple times, things like that. Something that's sort of interesting here is this says you may play cards with Watery Grave from your graveyard. Without any other knowledge, this reads like when the cards are played, they'll go back to graveyard, and then you can play them over and over and over. Obviously, that could change whenever we see some Watery Grave cards. Maybe it'll say specifically when these are played from graveyard, they get banished or something like that. But currently, with the little bits that we know about Necromancer, you might be able to loop these cards a lot in graveyard. So really keep an eye out for these Watery Grave cards to see what they do. It's going to be a core of what the hero does in general, and what the deck is sort of, it seems like what the deck identity is built around, other than gold and drawing and discarding and having lots of blues. So we can speculate on the symbol. I'll let other YouTubers figure that out. Let's move on to his card pool. We've seen 3 or 4 cards in the card pool. Let me show that here. So first of all, we're going to start with what I think is the best one of the 4, and that is right here in the middle, Paddle Faster. This is a 0 cost assumed, 4 power, block 2 or 3, that when you do something with an ally you control, gets Go Again. I'm assuming it's a 0 for 4 block 2 that gets Go Again. It might block 3, that would be crazy if we get like the Assassin Love. But to me it seems potentially very good, even if it does block 2. So a 0 for 4 is a great rate if we have action point economy, which we may or may not based on what the allies do and things like that. But it's also just a good 1-card play by itself if you don't have like Tunic or anything else. So I'm assuming that he's going to have a separate chess piece and not have the resource economy of Tunic. Regardless, there are historically like mid-range and grindy decks need to push damage into certain matchups. So for example, a lot of times you'll see new running like Scar for a Scar or looking for a scrap or anything like that, where the opponent goes, oh, thank God there's no disruption, I'm just going to take the damage. Paddle Faster might be this for Necromancer, as it's starting to seem like a blue-heavy, mid-range, sort of grindy match. Just having a 0 for 4 that could potentially get go again seems very powerful. So yeah, Paddle Faster seems very awesome. And if it blocks 3, that seems even more awesome. As long as it doesn't cost 1, then everything I just said is out the window. Moving on, Hoist 'em Up. This is the one card we see every single property of, and it is a block 4 that maybe blocks 5. That's it. It's a block 4 that maybe blocks 5. It's pretty cool because against like a Ranger in the limited set is going to be very important blocking tall. Of course, they're going to send these really big arrows with 1 hits, as is the class identity. There could be like Guardian, Dominates, and things like that. So blocking tall does have its value for sure. However, a block 5 after hoop jumping compared to just like a Sink or Shelter or Fate, it seems pretty negligible. I assume that we'll have a fridge of some kind to also help block, but maybe that's part of the class is you just are very fragile with equipment, so then the extra block here is important. Overall, although I don't see this being very good in CC, it seems like it's built more for limited to play around Ranger and Mechanologist so that you can block them efficiently. And then lastly, we see this Board the Ship. This is a 2-cost, 6-attack red that blocks, I'm going to assume 2, it might be 3, again, we don't know. I'm going to evaluate it as if it blocks 2, and it says if you do a thing with an ally, it gets Overpower. I don't know about this card, and it's going to depend on the set. I think this one, more than any of these 3 cards, will really depend on what the rest of the card pool looks like. Historically, Overpower is good for getting on-hits, so if there are things that we can do like on-hit create a gold, or on-hit do something to benefit allies, on-hit even draw a discard, things like that, then this could be very good. It also could be powerful if we get ways to buff it based on like number of allies or anything like that to go really tall with Overpower and then chip damage to close the game. But on its own, in a vacuum, based on just the few cards we've seen, I don't know if 2 for 6 Overpower is going to make the cut, essentially. It seems really cool. I love the art. It's really funny seeing this guy get the thumbs up, but we'll see about these cards. So overall, I think Paddle Faster is great for pushing damage into the matches that we need to. Hoist 'em Up is probably mostly for limited to block tall, but could be potentially good. And then Board the Ship might be really good with on hits or going tall. Moving on, and I apologize in advance, this is going to be the blurriest card of this whole video. This is the first card that we saw, though, and it's called Chart the High Seas. So when looking at it, some of it's legible, some of it's not. So what I can glean is that it says, look at the top 2 cards of, you may either pitch or put a blue card from, put the rest into your gray, and I assume it's graveyard. Create a gold token for something put into your graveyard, and then go again. So that's a lot of half sentences, but it seems like this is going to let you look at the top cards of your deck, either pitch or put a blue from them into your graveyard so you can turn on your hero ability. It'll potentially create gold that also turns on your hero ability, depending on how many you put in grave, and then it has go again. So this, in and of itself, is a blue going to graveyard to turn on your hero ability. All in all, it hits a lot of things that the hero wants to do based on the play patterns that we established earlier. So it just seems really good for all of the above, whether it's a blue that we're going to get into graveyard, a blue with go again, it draw and discard, it creates gold. It kind of just does all the things that we want. And that's the 4 cards that we know of Necromancer. So let's look at limited for a minute here. This is what's called a macro. If you've been around for Rosetta, then you might remember the Rosetta macro. I forget what it was called off the top of my head. But this is a new tool that will exist only in limited, only for young heroes. So for sealed and draft, I assume both players will have one of these under their control, but there might just be one on the field. I don't actually know. This says something along the lines of, the first time a hero is attacked each turn, place a gold counter on this. Whenever you or an ally you control deals damage to a something hero, you remove that many gold counters from this, then create gold tokens equal to the number of counters removed this way. So while some of that might be wrong or inaccurate, regardless, this is a macro that's going to be really caring about attacks and blocks when you're actually dealt damage or when you're dealing damage and you're creating gold as the big payoff here. As we've seen, all 3 heroes really care about gold generation, so this is going to, I guess, expedite their engines and get them online faster in a limited set. So this is obviously going to be very important for all 3 heroes, including young Gravy, I assume. We have yet to see young heroes, but Whatever young Necromancer will love this macro, just like every other hero. And it really drives home, like I said, that attacks, blocks, and dealing damage are very important in this limited set. So if Necromancer is a mid-range, grindy, defensive, anything in that route, then he might fit into a certain niche in this ebb and flow of the meta, compared to Ranger going tall and aggressive and Mechanologist going wide and aggressive. So he might be the defensive deck here in the triangle. It's obviously too early to see, but I do think Treasure Island shows us that a lot of blocking and things like that is really important, which is then why I come back to Hoist him up, being probably pretty good and limited, because then you could stop the damage entirely. Maybe that one extra point stopping you taking 1 damage is actually more impactful than just the 1 point of value here. So lastly, before we finish this video, I wanted to go through cards that already exist that I think might be good in Gravy. Obviously, everyone knows about Call to the Grave. I have already seen the prices spike. It is crazy. I'm unfortunate enough to not have my own playset, but it is what it is. This card is amazing. First of all, it's a blue with Go Again. So you're going to play this card, not care what it does, have a blue engrave, and your hero is online. You can now play Watery Grave cards from the graveyard. This card also says search your deck for a card and put it into your graveyard, then shuffle. So you can search for any Watery Grave deck that you want, put it into your graveyard, then because you did that, you can now just play it. Call to the Grave is going to be a core card for this deck. From everything that we can see right now, it just does exactly what you want. This card is amazing for Gravy Bones, sorry. Now, the second one is more of my speculation that Energy Pot could also be very strong in Gravy Bones, potentially. Obviously, it has the downside of being a no block, and it takes my action to put out. Again, we don't know what the action economy is going to look like for this class, so it's a bit too early to say. But if it's not too high roll, hoop jumpy, hopeful to put out an energy potion on an off turn or at the end of a combat chain, then this says on a later turn, I can pop this, get 2 resources, and send this blue to the graveyard. So now my hero's online, and I have 2 resources to pay for anything Watery Grave from my graveyard. So if there's like a 2-for-6 Watery Grave or anything along those lines, even if I am completely losing, he has stripped every card from my hand, I would normally just pass back. There's nothing I can do. Well, if you pop Energy Potion and you just play a card from graveyard, this is suddenly like a 0-card 2-for-6 or whatever the Watery Grave cards end up looking like. So to me, although it's still on rate and you're having to hoop jump with the Energy Potion in your deck, I could definitely see this being very strong, very powerful. Maybe even other potions and amulets and things could be good because they're basically all blues. Yeah, I think Energy Potion has a lot of potential, and we'll just have to wait and see what Watery Grave looks like. Moving on to what's probably like the jank that we won't actually see in the decks, but it's too early to tell, of course, is discarding blues into graveyard. Tip off, of course, we could just, as soon as it's in hand, we could just discard it. Boom, we're online. Sigil of Cycles, as Rhinar players know, you can play this out on 1 turn. It does not eat your action point. It'll go to graveyard next turn, as well as let you discard. So you have a bit of a hand filter, and then it in and of itself is a blue going to graveyard. Trade in, I think, is a great aggro option along the lines of that 0-for-4 that we mentioned earlier, Paddle Faster. So trade in says, when this attacks, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. And if it's played from Arsenal, it gets Go Again. So even though it's a 0-for-3 block 2, the rate is kind of below where you'd like to see it. This could just be a setup in Arsenal that lets you go 3 Go Again, and my hero's online with a big follow-up from graveyard. And lastly, Ripple Away, of course, is like Tip Off, where you can just discard it from your hand, no problem, no questions asked. And then it actually, unlike Tip Off, might be relevant and come up in certain metas or certain matchups. And then lastly, before we wrap up here, I wanted to go over other blues with Go Again. So again, this is like filling blues, getting you online so that you can play Watery Grave cards, and then the gold generating cards. So some of these may or may not hit, like Captain's Call may or may not be relevant for 0-cost cards. Maybe this lets you play that 0-for-4 and it gets +2. Again, it depends on what the card pool looks like. Same for Lead the Charge. If we do not have a good action point economy, but maybe everything costs 2 or 3, Lead the Charge could be good. Pick a card, any card is just a fun way to get a blue card into graveyard, especially if you're like looking for a budget, let's just learn the hero list. I think the card could be fun. Sift and Whisper the Oracle are some like great Florian classics where you just play the thing. It's a blue block 3, so if you have to block with it, you're not upset. You just play it, you get some value, and you go again. You're either drawing faster into your deck or you're sort of drawing faster into your deck. So either way, you're doing these things that your deck already loves to do on another level of getting a blue and cycling. This round, of course, is a great meta choice, but also is a blue with Go Again that lets both people draw a card. It seems like card draw, because of gold, is going to be very relevant in this meta and this set in general, so I would definitely keep an eye on This Round's on Me. It could be that it just ends up not being relevant because the card draw is often a downside for this card. But if they print cards that care about if your opponent is drawn, or things like Valda, this card could become very good as just a blue that you put into your graveyard and you keep on chugging, it pays for itself, and so on. And then lastly, I think Trot Along and also the other two blue block 3 care about 3 power cards from the Hunted are all relevant here for similar reasons that we said before, where you're just getting a blue in graveyard, you're kind of doing all the things that you want to do, and it blocks 3, which is always nice. Lastly, gold generators. Of course, Crown of Dominion, you just start with a gold that you can burn. Performance bonus is a red or blue potential that you could put into this deck. I think the blue would fill graveyard. Either way, it gets go again from Arsenal, similar to Trade In. I forgot the name. Oh. Well, and then Wage Gold, I think, is a good universal card that could also be a Necromancer card when you need it to be. And Money Where Your Mouth Is would let you wager gold, of course. So that's it. That's everything I have to say. I think that is Necromancer in a nutshell. Hopefully you've learned something from this video. Hopefully you're as excited as I am for Gravy Bones, despite his name. And hopefully these other 2 characters are also really cool. I love pirates. One Piece is sick. I thank you for watching, and I hope that the Necromancer ends up being very competitive and a lot better than Arachne Huntsman. So if you're hyped to see more, please stick around for this channel. You can expect to see a lot more Necromancer content once the spoilers come out, or as they're coming out over the next few months. I'd like to say thank you to Iron Lion as our sponsor on the team for Bloodrush Fellows. It's always nice doing this stuff with their support and traveling with their support. Yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.